Did you know the same man who walked away from her pregnancy would one day kneel in the street, begging for a second chance? By then, she was unreachable. This is Ada's story. She was born in a village so small, it didn't appear on most maps. A place where the roads were red with dust, where the mornings smelled like firewood and the evenings like rain on dry earth. No electricity most nights. No running water. Just community, labor, and the kind of quiet that gets inside your bones. Ada grew up in that quiet. Her mother sold groundnuts by the roadside. Her father repaired bicycles under a rusting zinc roof. They weren't poor in spirit, but they were poor in everything else. From the time she was 12, Ada helped at the market. She carried crates on her head before most girls her age knew what real weight felt like. She learned to count change faster than the older women. She learned to smile at difficult customers. She learned, early, that survival was not a given. It was earned. Every single day. But she was still young. And young people feel things deeply. So when Ton arrived, she felt it. He wasn't from her village originally. He'd come to stay with an uncle after losing his job in a nearby town. Some people arrive in a place and blend in. Ton was not that kind of person. He was loud without being rude. Confident without being arrogant. He had this way of laughing that made everyone around him laugh too, even if they didn't know what the joke was. He started coming to Ada's store. First to buy fruit. Then to talk. Then to stay longer than any fruit purchase ever required. "You're different," he told her one evening. "Different how?" she asked. "You don't waste words," he said. "I like that." She looked at him sideways, half smiling. "Most people don't like that." "I'm not most people." She would think about that line for a long time afterward. Because for a while, it was true. Their love grew the way quiet things do. Slowly. Steadily. Not like a fire, but like a tree. Rooted. Patient. Building something you couldn't see all at once but could feel growing beneath the surface. He would find her after the market closed and they would walk the long way home. He told her about his dreams. A business. A proper house. A life that looked different from the one they were both living. "I won't stay here forever," he said one evening, looking out at the flat horizon. "Nobody stays forever," Ada replied. "No. But some people leave and never come back." He looked at her. "I won't be that kind." She believed him. She held on to that belief the way you hold a flame in wind. Carefully. With both hands. Then one morning, Ada woke up and the world felt different. She couldn't explain it. A heaviness. A stillness in her body that wasn't there before. She told herself it was tiredness. Long hours. The heat. She went to the market anyway, the way she always did. But the feeling didn't leave. Days passed. Then weeks. And the truth, when it arrived clearly. Ada was pregnant. She sat outside her hut for a long time that evening. The sun was going down, painting everything orange and gold. It should have been beautiful. She barely saw it. Her hands were in her lap, very still, like she was afraid any sudden movement would make things worse. She thought about Ton. About everything he'd promised. About the way he said her name like it meant something to him. She thought about the child growing inside her. And she waited. When Ton arrived, he was laughing about something. Some story from his uncle's yard. He stopped when he saw her face. "What's wrong?" he asked. Ada took a breath. "I'm pregnant." The laughing stopped. The air between them changed. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was the opposite. A quiet shift, like the temperature dropping suddenly in the middle of afternoon. He stared at her. "Say that again." "You heard me," she said softly. He sat down. Stood up. Sat down again. His hands went to his face. How did this happen? Turned. I mean, are you sure? Yes. More silence. She watched him closely. She was looking for the man she knew. The one with the steady eyes and the easy confidence and the promises about never being the kind who leaves. She couldn't find him. This wasn't the plan, he said. Plans change, she replied. He shook his head slowly. I'm not ready for this. Neither am I. Her voice was very calm. Too calm. The kind of calm you find when you're trying not to fall apart. But it's happening. And we can face it together. He stood up again. I need time to think. Okay, she said. Think. He left that night without another word. She sat in the dark for a long time, listening to the sounds of the village settling into sleep, and she told herself it would be all right. He just needed time. He was scared. Anyone would be scared. She told herself that. She almost believed it. He came back the next day, briefly. He was distracted. Distant. He didn't touch her. Didn't ask how she was feeling. He talked around the subject the way people talk around something they've already decided but haven't said out loud yet. Ada watched him and understood. You're leaving, she said. It wasn't a question. He didn't deny it. There's nothing for me here. I was always going to go to the city. You knew that. I knew it. But you said you'd take me with you. He looked away. That was before. 3 words. That's all it took to crack everything open. She didn't beg. She wanted to. Every part of her wanted to grab his arm and make him look at her and remind him of everything he'd said. Every evening walk. Every promise under the stars. Every time he told her she was different. But she didn't. Because some part of her already knew. Begging wouldn't change what he'd already decided inside himself. He just hadn't found the courage to say it plainly. Go then, she said quietly. If that's what you've chosen. He left before morning. The village knew within days. That's how villages work. There are no secrets, only delays. The women at the market looked at her differently. Some with pity. Some with quiet judgment. A few with something that might have been recognition, like they had their own version of this story stored somewhere inside them. Where's the father? Became the question that followed her everywhere. Gone, she would say. Nothing more. Some called her foolish. Some said she brought it on herself. One woman told her directly, without malice but without kindness either, that this was what happened when a girl trusted a man with nothing but words. Ada nodded and kept walking. What else was there to do? She got up before dawn. She carried her crates. She counted her change. She smiled at difficult customers. She walked home in the evening, slower now, her body changing week by week, and she did not allow herself the luxury of collapse. Not yet. Not with a child depending on her. The pregnancy was hard. Her body hurt in ways she hadn't expected. There were days when she couldn't carry the crates and had to ask her younger cousin to help. Days when the heat was unbearable and the nausea didn't stop. Days when she sat alone at night and the loneliness was so heavy it felt physical. On those nights, she thought about Tond. Not with love. Not with hate. Just with a hollow ache, the way you feel about something you've lost that you can't get back. She thought about the life they talked about. The house. The business. The child they might one day have when the time was right, when they were ready, when everything was in place. Now the child was coming anyway. Ready or not. In place or not. She began to understand that life doesn't wait for your readiness. It simply arrives. And you either meet it or you don't. She chose to meet it. Chidi was born on a night of heavy rain. No hospital. A midwife, a lantern, and a storm that shook the roof like it was trying to get inside. Ada had never known pain like that. Not the physical kind alone, but the particular anguish of going through something enormous completely alone. No hand to hold. No familiar voice telling her she was doing well. Just the rain. And the pain. And the long dark hours of waiting. Then a cry cut through everything. Small. Sharp. Insistent. The midwife placed him in her arms and Ada looked down at this tiny, red-faced, furious person who had just arrived in the ward, and something inside her rearranged itself permanently. She had thought she was strong before. She had no idea. "You will never feel what I felt," she whispered to him. Her voice was wrecked. Her body was exhausted. But her eyes were clear. "I promise you that." She named him Chidi. It meant God exists. Because she had needed to believe in something that night. And she had come through. The years that followed were not easy. Let no one tell you that a good ending means the middle was simple. There were months when money was so tight she skipped meals so her son could eat. Months when her feet cracked from standing all day and she couldn't afford ointment. Months when Chidi was sick and she sat awake all night watching his breathing, terrified, calculating what the clinic would cost against what she had saved. She expanded her store. Slowly. Carefully. She began trading goods between nearby villages. She learned which routes were profitable. Which sellers were trustworthy. Which buyers would try to shortchange her and how to handle them without losing the relationship. She was not just surviving anymore. She was building something. People noticed. The same women who had whispered about her began to ask her advice. Young girls at the market watched how she moved through the world, with a quietness that had weight to it, and they took note. Her son grew. Sharp and curious, with his mother's stillness and something restless in his eyes. She raised him well. That was the only revenge she ever wanted. Meanwhile, in the city, Tan had what he came for. Work. Money. A rented room that became a rented flat that became something almost comfortable. By any visible measure, he was doing well. But the nights were long. There is a particular kind of quiet that follows a man who has walked away from something he shouldn't have. Not guilt, exactly. More like a low persistent frequency. A sound beneath all other sounds, reminding him of the weight of what he chose. He didn't talk about Ada. Some things you keep sealed because opening them would make them real in a way you're not ready for. But she was there. In the margins of everything. The woman he saw once from a bus window who had Ada's walk. The baby crying somewhere in his building at 3 in the morning that he couldn't unhear. The question that surfaced sometimes in the quiet, slow and heavy as something rising from deep water. What does my child look like? He didn't let himself answer it. Not for years. It was a woman in a market stall who finally broke something open in him. He had gone to buy tomatoes. The woman behind the stall was around Ada's age. She had a small child strapped to her back, sleeping, while she weighed and wrapped and made change and carried on 3 conversations at once. She did it all with a calm efficiency that stopped him cold. He stood there too long. "You buying or looking?" the woman asked, not unkindly. "Buying," he said. "Sorry." He walked away with his tomatoes and the image wouldn't leave him. A woman doing everything alone. Carrying the weight of a whole life on her back, literally, while the world moved around her without noticing. That night he lay awake until sunrise. By morning, he had made a decision. He returned to the village on a dry Tuesday. It looked smaller than he remembered. The red roads. The zinc rooftops. The smell of firewood. He asked after Ada. People looked at him with expressions he couldn't fully read. He saw her before she saw him. She was standing at a store, but nothing like the small fruit stand he remembered. Larger now. Well stocked. A young girl helping her wrap orders. Ada herself in a fitted blue suit, heels on uneven ground, speaking to a customer with quiet authority. Beside her stood a boy. Around 7 years old. Watching with focused eyes. His son. Something cracked open in his chest. Ada turned when she heard his footsteps. Her face went very still. Not cold. Not angry. Just still. Like a person who has prepared for a moment and is now simply inside it. You came back, she said. He dropped to his knees right there on the ground. I'm sorry. I know that isn't enough. I was afraid and I was selfish and I made the worst decision of my life and I have thought about it every day since. Ada looked at him for a long time. When I needed you, you left. I didn't ask you for much. Just to stay. You couldn't do that. I know. I had him alone. In a storm. With no one. She paused. And then I raised him. Alone. Through everything. I know. Do you? She wasn't being cruel. She was asking genuinely. Because I'm not sure you can know, from the outside, what that took. Silence settled between them. The kind that contains a great deal. Then Ada took a breath. I'm not going to pretend this doesn't affect me. It does. It always will. She glanced at Chidi. But he is not a punishment for what you did. He is my son. And he deserves to know his father. She looked back at Tond. I'll allow you to be in his life. That's not for you. That's for him. You'll earn his trust slowly, on his terms, not yours. But as for us, there is no us. There was. But you closed that door yourself. I'm not reopening it. I moved on a long time ago, she said simply. I had to. There was no other way to survive. She said it without bitterness. If she had been angry, he could have argued. If she had cried, he could have comforted her. But the simple quiet truth of it left him nothing to hold on to. She had genuinely moved on. He was the only one still carrying it. Tond stayed. He got a room in the village and found work nearby. He showed up when he said he would. He didn't push Ada. He was patient with Chidi, who was cautious at first, watchful, the way children are when they sense the weight of adult history they haven't been told yet. Slowly, something small and careful began to grow between father and son. Ada watched from a distance, allowing it, not interfering. She was fair. She never said a bad word about Tond to the boy. That was its own kind of discipline. But she never softened toward Tond himself. She was cordial. Civil, occasionally even warm in the way that people are warm to someone they have forgiven but no longer love. There's a particular grace in that. Other than anger. More honest than pretending. Tond understood it eventually. Some things cannot be undone. You can be sorry. You can change. You can show up differently. And none of that earns you back what you lost. It only earns you the chance to do better going forward. That was all he had. He decided to take it. One evening, Ada stood outside her home watching the sun go down. The sky was doing something extraordinary, layers of orange and rose and deep blue stacking over the flat horizon. Chidi was nearby, chasing something in the yard, laughing at his own game. She thought about the girl she used to be. Standing on red earth with a cloth bag in her hand and nothing ahead that looked like a future. She thought about every morning she got up anyway. Every crate she carried. Every cruel word she absorbed and kept moving through. Every night she lay awake beside her sleeping son and decided this was not the end of her story. She smiled. Not because it had been easy. Because it hadn't been, and she had done it anyway. She had built something out of the rubble of what he left behind. Not just a business or a reputation, but herself. Fully. Completely. No one could take that back. Some people only understand your value after they've lost it. They build the life they chose over you. And then one day they see you across a market and finally understand what they walked away from. But by then, you've already become someone they can no longer reach. Not because you're cold. Not because you're bitter. But because you grew. And they stayed the same.